may have the right answer, and there's some very clever people there that do, you may not have the correct answer at the right time. In many countries in the world, you would never get the opportunity to sit in the same room as these people.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Leadership Blueprint podcast. Really excited today to be joined by Gary Hubbard, SVP of Commercial and Operational Matters for the Biofuels Company based in Saudi Arabia. Gary and I have known each other for a number of years, and it's really great to have him on today. He's worked across the Middle East, North and South America, Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe. He's held a number of senior leadership positions for Maersk, DSV, DHL, Geodis, Hapag-Lloyd, Transmar, and obviously currently is with the Biofuel Company in Saudi Arabia. These guys were founded back in 2022, and they're now the largest producers of European compliant net biofuels in the GCC. Gary, as an individual, he's been married for 24 years to Julia. He's got two sons, Jack and Alex, both now in their 20s. One's here still in Dubai, and the other one is at university in the UK. And it's just really great to have Gary on the channel today. So first off, Gary, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Oliver. Looking forward to this.
Great stuff. So although I've given a quick intro to everybody, it'd just be great, I think, in your own words, to get a little bit more of your story from your corporate days into the Biofuels Company currently, and obviously that mission to lead the zero biofuels production. I think that's a really great place to start to give people that bit of an introduction. So kind of over to you, as they say.
Sure, my pleasure. So I think in essence, you could term me as a career logistician. I've been in global supply chain for, excess of 20 odd years now. So I've seen a lot of the trends come and go. I've worked in the disciplines of international maritime shipping. I've worked in mainstream logistics, in international freight forwarding. And I've been fortunate enough to be at the forefront of creating some of the most longest and most complex supply chains in the world. You mentioned I'm a father. I'm actually an uncle of many young nephews. So I think when you look at your history and you look at what you've been doing, you've been encouraging the movement of produce literally from one side of the world to the other. And then you look at what we're going through, in the world today, climate change emergencies, it's real. And I think, my corporate background working with certainly, smaller organizations that have all now become much larger organizations, you begin to ask yourself, what part am I playing in this emergency? How have I negatively contributed to the fossil fuel emissions, the increase in greenhouse gas emissions around the world? And about 5 or 6 years ago, I became involved with a biofuels company in Dubai. Was doing some revolutionary stuff. And it was at that point that I began to think, how do you take your lifelong love and passion for international supply chain, and how do you find a way to introduce a much cleaner, much greener element into that supply chain to stop being part of the problem and start trying to be part of the solution?
Yeah, 100%. Okay. And that kind of takes me really nicely into the first question really is, so what kind of motivated that almost career shift? I mean, you've touched on there wanting to be part of the solution. Was there like an aha moment where you said, I need to be, driving this change? What was that?
Yeah, I'm not sure there was ever the archetypal light bulb moment. I'm not sure. But, I had a great grounding. I've been very fortunate, as you mentioned, to work with some of the, the leading supply chain organizations in the world, the APM Moll and Maersk organization. I think that anybody who's ever worked for them will always be very grateful for this support and experience and training they give you. Equally, the likes of DHL. Privileged to have worked in Asia, privileged to have worked in North America, across Europe, the Middle East and Africa. I think what I recognize and what I've always striven to do in these companies when creating solutions for clients was to try and take waste out of their supply chains. I guess when we were younger, we called it a lean methodology. So we'd look at how you could take away non-value adding aspects in a supply chain context. So knowing that you then wanted to streamline the supply chain, knowing that you were looking to also, take cost out and increase speed to market, meant it felt very nicely into how do I reduce greenhouse gas emissions, because all of these things come with, poorly thought through manufacturing processes. As a consumer, we have become addicted to cheap fossil fuel. We think nothing of ordering a t-shirt which is made in Vietnam, put in a small box onto an aeroplane, flown halfway across the world and delivered to your home, where it be in North America, be it be in Europe. And I think none of us at the time, when we were creating these supply chains, had a feel for the carbon footprint and the problems, environmental challenges that this was creating. So I think when you take that logistical mind about trying to shorten the touch points, trying to streamline operations, and then you add a green component, the two sit really, really well together. So the outcome at the end of the day should be, cost effective, fast, reliable, but also environmentally friendly.
No, and there's some really good points you've made there. And I suppose an interesting thing for the listeners would be, were there particular processes that you use, particular methodologies to create some of those enhanced supply chains?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and supply chains, like any industry, certain things become fashionable over a period of time. And 20, close to 30 years ago, when I began my foray into international supply chain, it was all about consolidating people's business together. Then, as the organisations became larger, we saw the advent of Dell, who were one of the market leaders in supply chain. Back in the day, we've seen the advent of the likes of Amazon, followed by Alibaba. Now we have Temu. They changed the dynamics of the supply chain. And again, they push speed to market, they push cost effectiveness, and they push smaller lots of delivery being held in quite remote, generally cost effective locations. But that then puts the strain on the delivery network. And it's the delivery network that we know globally is what's causing the majority of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world, be it the road networks, be it the maritime networks, or be it the air networks.
Absolutely. And, there's a number of great initiatives I think each of those industries are kind of doing on their own. But I think it's really interesting that obviously with Biofuel Company that you guys have, you've been the first maritime bunkering for biofuels in the UAE. I mean, how did you, what impact do you see that having on the UAE and the wider region as a whole then?
Yeah, I think there's several things. I think in terms of the bunkering industry, there was a real, forgive the phrase, but a real sea change with the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and they released new guidelines in 2020. Effectively, that was designed to lay the framework, albeit not necessarily without legislation at that time, but to encourage people to do the right thing in international bunkering, to find a greener methodology for shipping. And there is no silver bullet, globally, there is no silver bullet. It could be hydrogen, it could be LNG, it could be biofuels blended, it could even be nuclear. Certainly when I was growing up, nuclear was a bad form of energy. And I still recall, seeing on the television Greenpeace and organisations like this who are fighting against nuclear, and all of a sudden nuclear is now back in the frame as a cleaner, safer energy. So I think IMO 2020 came along, and again, working in a biofuels industry with an international shipping background, it made perfect sense to align the organisation with bunkering experts. For the UAE, we partnered with Uniper and Monjasa, two of the leading names in the bunkering of very low sulfur fuel oil in Fujairah, and Monjasa has a network literally right the way across the UAE and most parts of the world. So working with those two organisations allowed us to be the first company to provide a biofuel blend to the international maritime industry. And I'm pleased to say that was the catalyst, and it was soon followed by organisations like ADNOC with their short sea vessels. It was followed by the likes of Abu Dhabi ports with their Safine feeder vessels. So, we've certainly been involved with bunkering from, from Fujairah all the way up to Masafa Base in Abu Dhabi, via Sharjah, via Jebel Ali, and via Port Khalifa. So I think that was a great initiative to bring to the market. And I'm pleased to say, that's continued. And now, I'm part of a coalition of various biofuel refineries across the GCC now that can offer biofuel for the bunkering market. By its very nature, it's short notice. By its very nature, it's large volume. But I'm pleased to say, with the partners that I've got in that coalition, we've all been able to support the companies such as CMA, such as Maersk, such as Hapag-Lloyd, as and when they're requiring biofuel. And inshallah, before the end of this year, we will also be in a place to be able to support the shipping lines, the carriers, when they're visiting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So yeah, it's been a real change in the maritime industry.
And I don't know if you're able to talk about this in detail, so I'll see what your answer is. Outside of maritime and outside of the obvious, bunkering and things we've just discussed there, what are some of the other industries and sort of potential clients that you've done work with? I know the answer to some of this, but I'm not sure which bits you can talk about. So what are some of those? So I think it's great for the audience to see, the wider remit of this as well, because it's not just a maritime thing that you guys are touching points with here.
What I'm really pleased to say is that the vast majority of our clients are so happy that they have found a way to be able to reduce their own carbon footprints that they want to scream it from the rafters. So they rarely avoid the opportunity to tell everybody what they're doing, because it is such a positive impact they're making. About 2.5, 3 years ago, my business partner now, but at the time a colleague of mine, we looked at the GCC markets, and we were looking to decide where would biofuels make the most tangible impact in a market. And we both felt that not only one of the potentially largest markets, but the one that it had a real sustainable strategy. It had a market where we could really make a difference, was Saudi Arabia. So we approached Saudi Aramco, obviously a very, very well-known organisation in Saudi Aramco in the kingdom, and under their patronage, we set up the first biodiesel refinery in Jubail in the Eastern Province. And at that time, our first client was in the road network. So it's supplying 100% pure biofuel to Procter & Gamble through their logistics partner, which was Maersk. And that was there designed to purely fuel their heavy goods vehicles as they moved product between their different warehouses within Kingdom and also across to Bahrain. Now that was, we went live in November of 22, and by the February of 23, we doubled the capacity of the refinery. And again, that was due to client demand. So the events industry had approached us, that asked us to supply fuel for Formula One, for Formula E, for concerts that are being held, because again, the consumer wants a green environment and know that the temporary power that is there for the lighting, for the sound, for the air conditioning, to power the F&B is coming from a sustainable, predominantly in-country source. Which takes me nicely into the Saudi Vision 2030, which is very much predicated on the likes of the giga projects. I'm fortunate enough to have been working in Saudi since about 2000, so I guess I've got a reasonable network of people in Saudi Arabia. My partner, being a Saudi national as well, is also very well connected. So, working with the likes of the Red Sea Global, whose infrastructure is the size of Belgium. On the Western Province, it is a luxury, purely clean, 100% non-fossil fuel development. So, with their support, with the events industry support, with the ministries of sport, with the logistics industry support, by the end of last year, we doubled our capacity again. So, coming into January of this year, we've found that we've got a capacity of 1 million litres of pure biodiesel every month that is being refined. We don't blend. In many countries across the GCC, I think we felt they've lost their way. They'll talk about millions of or tons of fuel they provide, but the reality is only maybe a 5% of it is biodiesel, or maybe a 10%, or possibly a 20%. We've had great support from the various ministries within the kingdom and the royal commissions, effectively, the part of the ruling family and the Public Investment Fund, the PIF. And the consensus is that will not happen in the kingdom. Anybody who takes biofuel in the kingdom takes a pure 100% biofuel without any fossil fuel support to it. So I think, we've become very, very proud that in a very short space of time, we can honestly claim to be the largest refinery in the GCC, even though there's been refineries in the GCC since 2009. And we are solely supporting our local domestic market with locally collected feedstock and locally delivered product, all for the benefit of the people of Saudi Arabia.
It's a great thing to see. I think, especially in this part of the world, it always has been a, what can we import? Whereas, starting to, across the GCC, countries doing more in-country products, and as you mentioned here, this being 100% within Saudi Arabia is a really interesting thing. And touching on your point as well, that clients want to shout from the rafters. I was in a meeting the other day. I won't say the guy's name. I'm not sure I'm supposed to, but you came up in a conversation. I was like, oh, we're actually doing a podcast with you in a couple of weeks. So again, it is something that people are talking about, and I think that's a very interesting thing to touch on as well. That it is something that people are wanting, and it is a bit of a sea change. And we'll touch on this again later, but is that something you're then seeing from a talent perspective, where where the talent is currently and where the industry is going to? Do you see this as a change in the type of skill set, or a change in the type of person that wants to be part of this? Is that something you guys are starting to see?
Yeah, I think I do. And I say that we do an awful lot of work in education. So we made a commitment to the country that has embraced our business and embraced us, to support the universities and the education system. So we spend quite some time working with the likes of KAUST and various others in educating, training, running schemes for students, doing tours of the refinery so they can come and understand. And I think what we found is certainly at that age bracket, 18 through 24, give or take, they have a real passion for the environment. They've grown up with the problems that their fathers, their mothers, their forefathers have created. So when they actually find a way that they can be part of supporting that, it's really difficult to kind of explain, other than to try and say that they see it as a career path. I think certainly when I grew up, a career path, you were a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter. Those were the tools of choice. Then you went in, the next generation then maybe went into computer programming, and that's now developing into AI and digitalization, which is phenomenal. But certainly the work we've done with the universities, people are actually looking at this and saying, actually, I don't need to become a doctor or an accountant or an architect. I could go into sustainability. And there's a myriad of different ways that they can support that. And not just that, but we have manufacturing elements. So people of an older age that have grown up in manufacturing have got great process disciplines. They understand quality standards, they understand ISO. You're seeing that they're also having the similar moments to me. I've been making this product for so many years, but I can apply my skills to the environmental industry. And again, it might be in hydrogen, it might be in LNG, or it may be in biofuels. So there's no shortage of talent, or a pipeline of talent that is just queuing up to come and be part of this solution.
And I think, it's interesting and probably very telling that, as part of when we were setting this up, I said, please provide us with a little short bio on yourself, and then we'll sort of structure out this interview. And you very quickly said, I want to also mention, a little bit of the family life in there. And I think, as you touched on at the start, it is, what can I be doing for my legacy? And I think that's a really interesting part. Is it's not just what am I doing for my career, it's what am I doing for future generations and the world as a whole. So no, it's a really interesting and valid point.
Yeah, I think it's something that always sticks with me, and should my children decide to sit down and listen to this, they'll probably be embarrassed, but I recall them coming home from school when they couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, and saying that they'd had a lesson on the environment. And given this was 20 years ago almost now, that was still quite an unknown. And they'd had a lesson on the penguins and how the the polar ice caps were melting and the penguins were losing their habitat. And I remember them going around the house with a stool, climbing up to the light switches and turning the light switches off, because that's what school had told them to do. If you're not in a room, turn the light switch off. Now we're a lot more advanced now in how we manage our electricity consumption, and we've got systems that manage our air conditioning. We've got lighting that comes on when someone enters the room. But I will never forget watching my sons going around the house with these little stools trying to reach the light switches. And you're right, now when people ask you what do, you can actually be quite proud, humble, I hope, but certainly proud that we're making a difference.
No, I mean that's really interesting, and it still ties very much into the education piece. Your example there is when education was at a slightly different part, but it is still that piece there that grows and grows. And I think it's super interesting. So how have you seen this sort of challenge, I would say, probably from reducing cost while enhancing the sustainability of your client? Because that's obviously must be a real sort of chicken and egg bit. How do you guys approach that?
It's an interesting one, and it is. And again, I approach it with a logistical mind, and I think how can we support what this client is doing? What are they doing to begin with? This is not just about the fuel aspect. How can we make things more efficient, more professional for this organization? And again, we're blessed to work with some very large, very professional blue chip global organizations that operate within the kingdom. And I think some of the first things that we've done is we've looked at the road transport networks. We've looked at optimizing their refueling. Sounds very simple. Take the fuel to the client. Don't send 150 vehicles out to roadside petrol stations where they will have additional stem mileage on their vehicles, where they'll have driver downtime while they're sitting waiting to refuel, where they'll clog up the stations for the consumers like you and us that want to go and fill our vehicles up. Better governance on the management of fuel into vehicles has nothing to do with biofuel per se, but it's a great discipline that comes from the logistics industry. Now, if that fuel that is being dispensed into the vehicles is biofuel, not only have they reduced wear and tear, reduced downtime, driver hours, reduced stem mileage, but they've also reduced their carbon footprint, because those vehicles are not driving as far as they used to. So immediately you began to demonstrate benefits just of the optimizing the refueling process, both professionally, both financially, both operationally, and certainly environmentally. And I think cost is always touched on. I said earlier, we have become addicted to cheap fossil fuel. There's no two ways about it. And most of the organizations I talk to all say the same thing. We have no choice. We have a choice in terms of continuing to be in business or not continuing to be in business. Many of the blue chip organizations around the world now will demand solutions that come with a clean green footprint. All of the major shipping carriers have green programs, which a lot of their end clients, you think the likes of Nestle, you think the likes of Carrefour, you think the likes of IKEA, they will work only with companies that offer them environmentally sensitive, clean, green logistic solutions. So do they come with an additional cost? For the most part, yes, possibly. If you're not incurring that cost, then you're not even in the game. Those organizations are not even at the table to be able to have a debate about cost. So it really is about being able for them to offer those solutions to actually get through the door. And then, as I said, they can choose EV, they can choose, a biofuel, they can choose any kind of different green fueling technology that they want. The nice thing that I've seen, and probably wraps this section up a little bit, is that companies want to make a real world tangible difference. They don't want to buy carbon offsets. They don't want to buy carbon credits. They don't want to trade it in some ubiquitous market to make their numbers look good. The organizations we work with are real and true. They want to stop those emissions coming out of their engines, be it a marine engine, a road engine, a power generator. They want to know that what's coming out of those things is fresher air, which also helps the environment, but it also helps the people. If you're running school buses around a compound, then you're pumping out dirty diesel, black smoke into the lungs of the children in that compound. If you're running these things on biodiesel, immediately you've got a much cleaner, healthier environment for the children there, which means less trips to the doctors, less asthmatics, less addiction to Ventolins, and less wear and tear on your healthcare system, and ultimately a cost, a lower cost of healthcare for that country that you operate in. So it's a complex picture, and I would sum up by saying you've got to be in it to be part of it, but the benefits are multitude.
And I think consumer behavior does drive some of this as well. So a little bit of chicken and egg, investing, invest today for tomorrow. I think people are making more informed decisions on all aspects of their consumption, and I think it's whether that is a philanthropic thought, whether that's you have children and you're looking for their future. Everyone does have to sort of be a part of this solution, as it were, and it's a as consumers, it's as simple as making choice A versus choice B. So no, I think it's a great thing you guys are doing. So going back to sort of the Saudi 2030 vision, then, what do you think some of the key factors that are going to continue to drive that success on the sustainability side? What do you see some of those being for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, Saudi 2030 vision is phenomenal. And that's not to say that other countries in our part of the world don't have them. The UAE recently announced a biofuels vision and a biofuels, program to support here in the UAE. So other countries have visions, other countries have numbers and diktats. What we found with Saudi Vision 2030 is it is tangible. I've been blessed to be able to spend time with the ministers of energy, the ministers of the environment, the ministers of waste, and the ministers of industry. And in many countries in the world, you would never get the opportunity to sit in the same room as these people and for them to talk to you about how you can support the vision and how they openly can support you to help them reduce their emissions and support the vision. So I think Saudi Vision 2030, it's ingrained in government. It's not a quango. It's not a separate division. It's down to the environmentalists. Let's forget it. It doesn't affect me. Everybody it affects. And we see that all the time. Some of the other tenets about the Saudi vision is also that they're pushing quite hard to become a logistical hub for the GCC, and obviously there's a huge crown there in the likes of Dubai and certainly parts of Abu Dhabi, and for them to be able to overtake becoming an international hub for air, for sea, for road, but it's part of their vision, their tenet for the vision, and it's predicated on sustainability. So without saying too much, we will see by the end of this year that bunkering of biofuels in the mainstream will be available in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as we did 4 years ago in the UAE. This is part of the vision to become a sustainable long-term logistics hub. So it's a, as I say, it's a real tangible program. It has many different tenets to it. Ultimately, it is there to support the people who live in the kingdom and the next generation and the generation after that.
Absolutely, and I think it's great to hear you say that the amount that they share with everybody in terms of the information flow. And I was at an award ceremony 3 or 4 weeks ago, and part of the 2030 vision did win an award on innovation, and it was a really interesting one to see kind of that vision, how it's being put together. So no, it's just great to hear kind of firsthand some of that stuff as well.
It's really good.
So looking at kind of, what would you say for yourself have been some of those personal values that kind of influenced your approach within this space? And I mean that from, you've come from, the corporate world, and you're into effectively a bit more sort of startup SME type environment. Have you seen some of those things that would work in one space don't work in another? What would some of those be? I think that's an interesting one to kind of expand a bit further on as well.
Yeah, I think so. As I said earlier, I've been very fortunate to work with some very, very large organisations who've got a great deal of people skills to impart to their teams. I've also worked for mature SMEs to the point where they have become so attractive as an organisation, the large organisations have bought them. And when I looked at my CV, Ned Lloyd is Musk. McGregor Corey is DHL, United Arab Shipping is Hapag-Lloyd, SBS is DSV. So it's been great to be on those journeys of developing, firstly learning from some of the bigger organisations, but then developing the teams to all go in the same direction. To all be on the same bus is the adage that's often used. People work with people. People like to work with people who have similar values and who have a similar moral compass as they do. And somebody told me very early on in my career, what would your grandmother say about that? If you said to her, what are you doing? And and I still come from that generation where families are everything. You would always visit and have meals together, and they would all spoil you as a child and send you home with a pocket full of sweeties. But it gave you a really strong, clear moral compass. And I think no more than ever is that required for us all as business, I won't say leaders, but business participants, because I still learn every day. I can learn from the most junior person in our business as I can learn, from the most experienced person in organizations. I think what I would say that our sector, the energy, the passion is infectious. I think we've always said no problems, only solutions. That's a great logistical mindset to have. But the people that I see, not only in our company, but also in our clients' companies, they are so passionate about what they want to achieve. They're so intelligent, they're so communicative, and they want to continuously do the right thing, and whatever that right thing might be. But family, very overused word in business. But we had our annual celebrations a few weeks back, and everybody came, everybody brought their family with them. So our family's family, and we had a fantastic, it was an afternoon, it was time when everybody could be there, and just getting to meet some of your colleagues, partners we generally know anyway, but you're their children, and see how they were learning what we're doing and understanding, or trying to understand what it is we do. And you hope that they will be the next generation of leaders with those same values that we've helped impart to them.
No, absolutely. It reminds me of literally something I was watching last night on YouTube. It was a short from Simon Sinek. I'm sure you know the guy, and it was he'd done some time with the Navy SEALs in the US, and it was around attitude and performance. Yeah. And they did it as a diagram, and it was saying, nobody wants the low performer, bad attitude person. But what he said is, what's very interesting, and of course everybody wants the great output and the great attitude, but they're the unicorn's hard to find. But he said what a lot of business have done is they focused on the output and not as much on the attitude side of things, the values. And so they end up with everybody in the top left-hand corner. And you know, he kind of joked, he was like, if you go to a company and ask them who's the guy nobody likes, everybody knows who that is. Whereas if you go to a business and you say who is the person that's there, who always helps, who's always puts their hand up and you know, wants to be part of the solution, that's the person you want. And they're not always the person with the highest skills. You know, there might be a mid-performance skills person, but their attitude and their values is far outweighs, and therefore you get that sweet spot. So no, it's great to hear you guys say that. So
I think there's many ways of getting to that as well, Oliver, isn't there, if I may? You know, we don't talk about, we like to drive behavior. I don't want to see 4 people in a room, each with separate KPIs that are often opposing each other. That's not what I want to see. I see it in companies. My whole career, I've seen that. But I think if you drive the behavior of those individuals to want to do the right thing because they can see and feel the benefit of it, and I don't mean financially or you know, anything that's maybe as tangible as that, but so that when they go home at the end of the day, they know they've done a good thing. They might tell their friends who they say, gosh, I'd like to come and work with you. That sounds like a wonderful company to work for. If you can drive the correct behavior, the rest will follow. It absolutely does follow.
100%. And I think it also is important. I think, and this is kind of leading into the next question of, a business vision needs to then link with the values of the individual. What would you say have been, how have you guys defined that vision, and how does that lead into, let's say, your top 3 values that you look for in people? And this is looking at, if I was to tell a person in the future what they should be focusing on as values, that would be obviously great for us as an organization, but for the wider sustainability of the globe, what have you kind of, you know, our vision is this, but these are our values, and this is kind of our top 3 kind of takeaways. What do you think those are for you guys?
Yeah, I tell you, I mean, it's really interesting you asked that question. One of the first things that my partner and I did, we did it jointly together, and it took us quite some time to get down. And it is vision, values, and mission. It is technically, that's what it is, but that wasn't how we went about it. We didn't sit there and say, what's our vision, what's our mission, what's our values? We sat down and said, what do we want, and how do we want to achieve what we want, and what are the key elements of that? And my wife, for a sin, spent many years in HR, so I used her as a sounding board as well. Once we'd got to something that we were reasonably happy with, just to flesh it out and just to make sure, you know, it looked good, it was communicable, people in differing languages can understand it. Because again, you know what? Yes, I'm an English speaker. A lot of my colleagues, you know, Arabic is their first language, and English is their second or possibly their third language. So not only did we spend a lot of time putting together that, and some of the key words that came out of that, they were about vision. They were about family. They were about trust. They were about empowerment. Yeah, and again, you have to be very clear on what empowerment is. But they were also about reliability. You know, there is no such thing as a silly question. Sorry is not a bad word. I don't know is not a bad phrase. It's all about being open and being there for everybody. You know, we don't want to see people sitting at their desk past their working hours, but we'd like to think that if we have a challenge on a Friday morning, there's a group of us that can get together and fix that challenge. And, you know, so far so good, that's worked very well. We even went so far as that when we were blessed with the head of the Royal Commission for Jubail and Yambu did the official opening of our facility last year. And we, as part of the giveaways for the team that came, and the Aramco team came, and some of our key suppliers came, customers, obviously, as part of the giveaway packs, we gave them all a copy of our vision, values, and mission, because we wanted them to understand who we are and what we stand for, and how we tell our people to treat our suppliers and to treat our customers. And that was fundamental to this as well. They are part of our family. Without our client base, without our supplier base, we are nothing. Therefore, you treat them as part of our family. You know, there's no such thing as an unreasonable request. we are in this for the right reason. We're here to support Vision 2030. We're here to reduce the carbon emissions of the kingdom. We're here to make a cleaner, better future for the children of the kingdom. So it's really interesting you asked that question, but it was a really good day, and it was quite a talking point for many of them that they actually received this. They've not seen that sort of thing before. A poster on the wall is not the same.
No, gosh, no. And it's, within JOH Partners, a key thing for us is the attitude of the individual. And I think we always, every day when we have our meetings, we're going through, what are we looking to achieve? And again, yes, it is to find people a job, but it is finding the right people, the right job
Absolutely.
that makes a difference for everyone involved. So no,
Absolutely.
it's, I mean, that's part of the reason you and I probably get on so well. I think we've always had that. Yeah, but it is, how are we together, achieving things as you and I? How are we in our careers achieving, certain things? And that's where we've helped each other in terms of different introductions and things like this. So no, it's always really good to hear. Look, I could talk to you for hours and all of this, but in terms of, starting to move towards wrapping it up a little bit, what would be kind of let's say your soundbite, your three kind of takeaways, or it could be just one takeaway, 1, 2, 3 takeaways for people in terms of, if you want to be impactful in your career, and whether that is somebody at the start of their career or somebody later on in their career, this is where the world is going. This is what, you need to be thinking about. And these are things which, biofuel is doing, but this is what my advice to people would be to kind of, take that next leap in their career. What might those be?
It's an interesting one, and I would answer it in two ways. I think I would answer it one with my business head on, with my grey hairs of experience, but I would also answer it as a father too. To two young sons, not young anymore. They're sort of 21, 22, who are just starting on their individual careers. And at that age, I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew if I was enjoying something or didn't. So, I think my advice would be to always understand, or try to understand, the business you're in, the industry you're in, the sector you're in, the discipline you're in. Always try to look outside of what you're being asked to do and see how that fits into, the larger picture, or if you're looking for a new role in a new company, how you impact the larger organization. Where does your value, or where could your value be over and above the job description that you've been handed for a new role? So I think anybody that does that research on the organisation, on the people they're meeting, that's for me is number one. It's critical to understand how you can fit into it. I think if you find an organisation or an industry or a direction that you seem to enjoy, then throw everything at it. Be passionate about it. You cannot teach or train passion. It comes from deep down inside. You could be passionate about your football team, your cricket team, your rugby team, but be passionate about your industry. Be the guy or girl, that wants to tell everybody what they do. When when someone asks a question, what do you do? The first hand up, because you're passionate and you want everybody to know what it is that you do. But also be sensitive. Sensitive to the needs of the business. What are the needs of the business, and how does your element fit into that? And I think the third thing, and I guess this is probably more so around maybe the environment, maybe where we're at now, and I see a lot of organizations not always getting this right. Where you do have organizations that are very large and have silos in them for very obvious and very well documented reasons, try and understand the needs of those other departments, try and understand the needs of the end user, try and take their thoughts into consideration when you're building a business case for change. To some of us, change comes natural. It always has done. For many, it doesn't, and they get afraid of change. So you may have the right answer, and there's some very clever people there that do. You may not have the correct answer at the right time. Again, you've got to think about that larger picture, how it affects others. If they understand how it's going to affect them, the chances are, if it's the moral compass is correct and you're going in the right direction, they'll be there to support you. If they don't have that understanding, if it's literally, this is what you should do because I say so, then clearly you get the complete opposite effect. So I think understand your business, understand how it relates to others, and be passionate about it.
Yeah, no, they're great takeaways, and again, the underlying thing of all of those is communication. You know, and I think that's key. And I think your bit there about being passionate. My own personal, I was originally a mechanical engineer with the Ministry of Defence. Enjoyed it. Just realised I was never going to want to do that forever. And a few things along the way, we're now in what I do today. So yeah, very much. It resonates very well with me, that one. I think it is. You need to want to go that extra mile by actually caring about what you do. It's a very important thing for sure. But yeah, look, I think that's probably a great place to finish today. I've absolutely loved the conversation. I mean, we've covered off some really good bits there of, biofuel, of Saudi Arabia, of individuals, of values. And I think that the values and the communication piece at the end is a great way to sort of wrap all this together. But yeah, again, Gary, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure today. And thank you so much. And yeah, we'll catch up again soon. Thanks.
My pleasure, Oliver. My pleasure.